State University, Indiana, USA. I will be facilitating today's webinar from Star Scholars Network. So before I introduce our wonderful panelists, I would like share some information about our upcoming exciting webinars on August. So, okay. We will have a STAR webinar on tips for publications. So Dr. Bista, would you like to share more information about this upcoming webinar next month?
Absolutely, yes. This is one of the webinars. We had a frequent request from our colleagues regarding on publications process. So we have invited a great, amazing colleagues who have published books this year in 2020. So, there's some of the names: Darla Deirdre, we have David Di Maria, Raul Chowda, Catherine Gomez, Rajika Bhandari. We have Lee Tran from Australia, and many other colleagues, Dr. Sam Sharma from SUNY. So they will be talking about their publication process and as well as the tips for publication and collaboration with many of our colleagues. So that's the upcoming webinars, and we encourage all of you to register and be the part of this process and have your questions, answered in that session. Thank you. Back to you, Dr. Liu.
Thank you, Dr. Bista. For more information about upcoming STAR webinar series or specific Zoom webinars, you can visit the website, our website, Star Scholars Network, or get email from STAR. Okay, so. Some folks may already know STAR have initiated a webinar series called Public Health and Education in a Transnational Society. This is our fourth webinar under this series. Today we will focus on talking COVID-19 and changes in higher education, teaching and learning. We have three panelists today, including Dr. Dennis, Dr. Bista, and myself. Dr. Dennis has led the STAR mentoring initiatives. She has been included internationally for over 25 years in different universities. She has a rich experience in establishing a branch campus for Suffolk University in different continents. And under her leadership, the international student recruitment gets significant increase, as you can see. And she also worked on developing a network of 10 international education consultants and work with different universities and colleagues in many Asian countries and European countries. So we are very pleased to have her as our panelist. So Dr. Bista is as you already see and know him well, he is an associate professor in Department of Advanced Study, Leadership and Policy at Morgan State University. His research focused on college student experience regarding classroom participation, perceptions of academic integrity, learning strategy in higher education. She published books regarding a global perspective on international student experience in higher education tensions and issues. She also working on a book series regarding global student mobility. So very significant, important work. Myself, I am assistant professor at Teachers College at Ball State University. My research interests including international student mobility, globalization and higher education, educational policy study, and also I'm interested, my recent research project focus more on the role of international education in the formation of social elite. Okay, so in the next 30 minutes, you will hear a presentation from Ms. Dennis. She will provide us a holistic picture about how COVID-19 has interrupted and restructured many aspects of higher education, such as how students are recruited and admitted, where and how students are taught, how measurements are needed to safely rearrange classroom, etc. So after her presentation, Dr. Bista and I will join her to form a panel, to make a panel conversation that will focus more on discussing how we need to understand the change in higher education, teaching and learning caused by COVID-19. And after the panel conversation, we will have about a 10 minutes question and answer. So that's the structure of today's webinar. So Dr. Dennis, Ms. Dennis, are you ready to start your presentation?
I'm ready, Dr. Liu, and thank you for that very nice introduction.
Thank you.
So I want to thank each of you for joining us today for this webinar. And although I realize most of you are probably teachers or academics, I want to share with you that my area of expertise, with the exception of teaching enrollment management at in a higher education master's program, my area of expertise is in the administrative functions of recruitment, admission, registration, retention, and graduation. So a lot of what you will hear today may not be directly impacting you, but it will impact you in the future because those beginning administrative functions, which have changed dramatically, will ultimately trickle down into what academics and teachers and faculty do in the next coming months. Next slide. We shall never again be as we were. I always love starting webinars like this with that quote because I believe one of the most difficult things that we are facing right now is people believing that after we get a vaccine or after the confusion and the panic of COVID-19 passes, we will just go back to being what we were. In my opinion, that will never happen. There will never be a new normal. There will only be the normal. So what impact, and I'm sure all of you participating in this webinar today could probably answer the question on this slide better than me. What we do know, next slide. What we do know is that COVID-19 has disrupted every aspect of higher education, how we recruit students, how we register students, how students are taught, how they are arranged in classrooms if your university is planning to have in-person classroom instructions. Every aspect, the research that you do, the research assistant funding that is so vital to a lot of the research projects that are underway throughout the world. All of this has been disrupted. Whether you are from the United States or listening from other parts of the world, federal and state funding for higher education will be impacted because state and federal budgets are decimated by the virus. We will probably have, if we are not already, in a worldwide recession. I know there are parts of Asia that have already declared that we are in a recession. And just before I started zooming in to this meeting, I've received information that the US economy has shrunk by 35% in this last quarter. So the impact of all of this is not just for the fall term or the spring 2021 term. This is going to have long-lasting implications for all of us. And the most important thing, in my opinion, is to realize that, we have these disruptions are not going to go away. What do we know? We know that there have been furloughs, layoffs. Now we're moving into permanent layoffs. Administrative and academic staffs have been reduced. The financial difficulties that are created by declining enrollments, fewer international students, and as I just mentioned, reduced federal and state funding and less fundraising. Probably for some of you in the United States, one of the most difficult things that you might be facing is if your university decides to defund your pension plans. There are several universities that have already decided to do that. Next slide. And at least 50,000 higher education employees in the United States have already been terminated or furloughed. I should share with you that that is a 2-month-old statistic. I don't have latest statistics on how many additional higher education employees have been terminated. So what does that mean? I'm terminated or are furloughed. It means that perhaps your department may contract. It means that you will have fewer resources. For a variety of reasons, we're not going to be traveling to conferences. We're not going to be bringing colleagues into our countries, into our universities for collaboration. The long-lasting effects of this virus, we are just beginning to understand. Okay. Again, the majority of you are probably already doing this. Most colleges and universities will incorporate online learning with classroom instruction, but one of the largest organizations in the United States, the American Association of Collegiate Registrars and Admissions Officers, published a report recently. 60% of the universities were considering or have already decided to remain fully online, but almost 60% of American parents would support enrollment at an institution only offering online courses. And those parents do not want to pay the same amount of money, the same amount of tuition for online instruction as for in-person instruction. All of the admission and practices and recruitment practices have already changed. If you are recruiting students, you no longer can travel to recruit them. You no longer can bring students to your campuses for admission days, for looking at your university from the perspective of, do I want to enroll here in the future? And admission based on SAT scores or ACT scores, I believe, will be a thing of the past. I do not believe that they will be coming back. And that has some positive implications. Remember, the virus has shed a very bright light on some of the difficulties and some of the inefficiencies in higher education. And along with, again, in my opinion, along with outdated business models and outdated admission practices, I believe that some of the criteria that we used to use for admitting students to our universities will be changed. The University of California system is the largest system in the United States. They have decided that they will create their own admission criteria examination. And I believe, at least in the United States, that will be throughout the United States. Many other schools will follow suit of California. Okay. What are we all doing today? I talked with Dr. Bista before we began this, and I said, I am so zoomed out. This is the only way that we can communicate at this point in time. Whereas we would have gone to a conference. This would have been a conference that many of you would have heard me speak in person. We don't have that. Look at this figure from Zoom. I found this very interesting. And again, the latest data that I have is from March 23rd. The average number of Zoom downloads was 56,000 in January. On March 23rd, on one day, it was 2.13 million. And I am certain that that is a much larger figure at this point. Zoom has, or if it's IBM meetings that you use or other platforms, has its advantages and it has disadvantages, but this is one of the disruptions that will be with us for a while. Next slide, please. In admission, we now have virtual admission tours, open house days, registration, academic conferences. All of these things now are going to take place either from home or from office. I think it was that Google announced this week that all of their workers until the end of 2021 will be working from home. Now, they may know something that we don't, but it's an admission, in my estimation, that the disruptions caused by this virus in all of our industries, not just higher ed, but we're talking about higher ed today, but all of this disruption is going to be with us for a good long period of time. I liked this quote from the professor at the University of Toronto. The emotionally and spiritually sane response is to be prepared to be forever changed. And at least from the colleagues that I have been dealing with, this is the most difficult thing for them to wrap their heads around, because change is difficult. It's difficult whether you're teaching, whether you're a university president, whether you're an admission officer, whether you're the chief financial officer, or whether you're fundraising. Change is very difficult, whether it's in higher ed or any other industry. But it is really, I think, the bedrock of where, first, what we have to understand before we can go forward. Next slide, please. What are some of the opportunities? Because there are always opportunities that disasters or disruptions create. And so the first one that I see is the restructuring of the academic year, combining both in-person and online learning. Why can't we have this? Why does it have to be that online learning is terrible, or you can only have people in person? There's one university in the United States that I am really fond of using this as an example. Very early on in March, they decided, because I believe their president has a vision, they decided that regardless of what the virus did, they were going to do it this way. They would bring their freshman class to campus. Everybody has a single room. They would bring their seniors to campus. Everybody has a single room. The sophomores and the juniors took their classes online. And in the next semester, they would switch. And that made a great deal of sense to me. It also gave, because I spoke to a parent of an accepted student at Haverford, it gave that parent a sense of security that the university was on track. They knew what they were doing. They had a vision of what they wanted to look like at the end of the semester. I believe that the 2-semester scenario is done. It's finished. I believe that we will have to create 3 semesters, a 12-month-long academic year. And following that, there will be a 12-month admission and recruitment year where students are evaluated on a monthly or weekly basis in admissions. Why do students have to wait months to get a decision and all the decisions go out at once? If you have multiple times when you can enroll, then you have to have multiple times when you can be accepted or denied to enroll. And so I believe that there will be multiple admission times when students will be notified. And I do believe the best admission officers will have that information going out 24 to 48 hours after review of credentials is complete. There is a slight bit of research to prove that some universities around the world are structuring gap years that make sense. They are they are effective. Some of the schools are creating gap year programs, which can then be translated into some academic credit. And there are some families throughout the world who simply don't feel they have enough information or they are safe enough to send their child away, either to a different part of the country or to a different part of the world. And I do think that we will be creating separate courses for residential and for online students. That's an opportunity that COVID has created. Next slide. The business models need to be changed for a long time. New financing options we have so many financing options that are antiquated, and people are now asking, what am I paying money for? What am I getting out of this experience? I don't want to pay the same amount of money if my child is taking only online courses for a semester, if he or she is taking courses in person. So new business models will have to be created, and it is about time. There is too much student debt, especially in the United States, where the average student debt is equivalent in many cases to a mortgage, to a house mortgage. And so I look forward to seeing some creative refinancing schemes, mechanisms put in place by creative chief financial officers. This I thought was interesting, this quote from Andrew Connors, because while some of my remarks may be US-centric, they are clearly, this disruption is clearly worldwide. And so Mr. Connors, who's from Lloyd Banking Group, says, every university we have spoken to expects to be impacted by the virus, and for some schools, the potential loss of income is projected to be greater than £100 million. And that was before you factor in that losing new students has a multi-year impact. So again, it's not just the money that we do not receive in tuition in the fall or the spring term. It is 3 or 2 or 4 years hence, because you will not have that student revenue. And again, how do universities pay for their enterprise? Tuition from students, fundraising, auxiliary services like room and board and the bookstore and things like that, and then grants and funding from federal and state governments. Those are the 4 ways that universities can have in the past financed their educational enterprise. All of those mechanisms, all of those things have been disrupted. What can we do? I think that to create collaborations, not competition, between local, national, and international colleges and universities. When I was the Vice President for Enrollment and International Programs at Suffolk University in Boston, one of the bedrocks of our recruitment, if you will, which I called cohort recruiting cohorts of students, not one by one by one by one, but cohorts of students. And we did that through a series of articulation agreements, 2 years in a particular college abroad or in the United States, and then 2 years at Suffolk University in Boston. When I established a branch campus in Madrid, Spain, and in Dakar, Senegal, the students took 2 years of the courses there. They were all Suffolk approved courses, and then they took 2 years at the Boston campus. They lost no time, they lost no credits. It was a very effective way to increase our enrollment and also to give students the opportunity to have 2 years of a less tuition expense, because the students at those 2 colleges paid half of the tuition that they paid in Boston. This is a wonderful quote. I'm sure many of you have seen it. I'm sure many of you have used it, but it's on here. In 1665, Cambridge University was forced to close because of the plague. Isaac Newton decided to work from home. He discovered calculus and the laws of motion. Just saying. this is a tremendous opportunity for us. Again, I was talking with Dr. Bista before we began speaking, and yesterday I was part of a panel discussion with ministers from Canada, all over Canada, higher education ministers. And the theme is, yes, disruption. The theme is, yes, retraction. The theme is, yes, change. But the business of higher education is change. That's really the business of it. And I do believe that in the future, it is not the reworked university. It is not doing things at the margins and hoping that things will be okay, that students will come back, that the virus will magically disappear and never resurface. We don't know any of that. But it is the reimagined university. And in order to have a reimagined university, you have to have a reimagined chief executive, a president, a chancellor who is thinking from the end, who has a vision, who focuses not just on strategic planning, but on vision planning. What do you want your school to look like at the end of this? What do you want? Who are you empowering to make the changes that are necessary for you to reimagine your university? Do you have a chief innovation officer, somebody who is charged with creating a vision committee, not a strategic planning committee, but a vision committee, where people who are not normally at the table, like the university registrar, like the career counselor, like the head of buildings and grounds, like a university professor who has an expertise in consumer spending, for example, and who could work with the admission office to help them to identify those applicants that are most likely to enroll based on consumer pattern of spending. The reimagined university, in my opinion, will be the greatest residual, if you will, the greatest residual of this pandemic. And we're at the beginning of this discussion. Today, I could speak, and I hope that you would have questions that would keep us engaged for another hour. We don't have that time. My time is I've already spoken more than I'm supposed to. So I will turn this back over to Dr. Liu and Dr. Bista, and we'll hopefully continue with some questions from you. But I do believe that this is an opportunity for us, not just a challenge, not just a disruption, not just terrible times. I believe we can use this time to reimagine ourselves, the work we do, how we teach, how we administer, and how we make this enterprise for our students, whether domestic or international, an experience that will last for the rest of their lives. Thank you.
Unmute, Dr. Liu.
Sorry. Thank you so much for your informative and thoughtful presentation, Ms. Dennis. In the next about 15 minutes, Dr. Bista and me will join Ms. Dennis to discuss some related topic about higher education, about COVID-19 and higher education, teaching and learning. So we have prepared some discussion questions consistent with what Ms. Dennis just shared with us. Here is some questions maybe many of us have thinking about, and also speak to Ms. Dennis' presentation. What is the biggest challenge or problem, obstacles that universities and college might faced in this pandemic?
Dr. Liu, I'll start off with that if you don't mind, because I think
Sure.
there are obstacles that are short-term and there are obstacles that are long-term. So the short-term obstacles are, for most of you participating in today's webinar, how am I going to teach? Who is going to be in my classroom? Am I safe? Is my job safe? Is my department contracted? What about my funding? What about collaborations with colleagues? When will I be able to invite them to come to my campus? How many students will enroll in my university in the fall? That's a short-term obstacle, and it is an obstacle. But then there are the longer-term obstacles, and that is what, again, I'm repeating myself from my presentation. What do I want? What does my university want our institution to look like, to be for our students after this is over, after the panic and after the confusion and the disruption of COVID-19 is over? So when we ask this question, and in my opinion, when we answer this question, it has to be both long-term and short-term obstacles. And the biggest obstacle that I feel short-term are enrollment and finances, and the health of our faculty and students in their teaching modes.
This is very insightful comments, Ms. Dennis. It makes me think about what my university, Ball State University, is actually doing now. I know it's really speak to what you just said. You know, my university actually have a strong planning team to make a return to campus plan that include several key tips regarding what workplace expectation about, how we access buildings, how employee health scanning and self certification assessment, safety practice, travel standard, wellness, and general resource, and even including a very important request for leave or disability commendations, so on and so forth. So I agree with you that in order to understand higher education, COVID-19 and higher education teaching and learning, we need to understand this pandemic's challenge our existing university structures, and perhaps maybe sometimes it actually provide us opportunities to restructure, reimagine, to reform our existing universities. With that said, maybe we can focus more on teaching and learning topics, because many of us are higher education educator. So we have some questions that we not only want our panelists to share our thoughts, but we also want to invite our audience to share your perspective, your insight, and your experience at your institutions with us. So the next question focuses particularly on teaching. How are university college catching up? It's summer semester, and we already experience spring semester. How are universities catching up with online remote teaching? What could be some practical tips for those in transitions?
Okay, I will share my experience here. As a classroom teacher and being, engaging with the students and colleagues every day, I think we are missing that, real interaction in person, and the student participation in the clubs or organization, as well as their involvement in those labs. However, I think, as Ms. Denise has earlier mentioned, that we are also learning ourselves, and gaining the new possibility, new direction of moving forward. A few months ago, we didn't know how far we could go. Now, each of us, do have some sort of experience in online virtual teaching, use of technology. Imagine yourself the number of virtual meetings that you have attended. Many of the things were impossible, number of conferences. Even in my personal case, I attended several CIES virtual meetings, and have a more presence than even going in person session. So that's something. And also I explore number of technology that enhance your teaching and learning with your students. So definitely, yes, you miss the in-person interaction with the students. However, virtual capacity has given you the new direction. So it has, the use of technology has certainly empowered and inspired for many of us. The couple of things I would highlight is, instead of going through the difficulties, I think many of you might have, experienced some of the challenges. When I ask you to make a list of challenges, definitely you have a tons of list, such as the student absence, disengagement, maybe dishonesty, or expectation of easy grades. But I would go with the more positive aspect of your connection with the students. So to be an effective educators, I think instead of complaining, we have to focus our energy to redesigning curriculum, pedagogy, and looking into how you can maintain the quality and rigor. Probably we should invest in or focus our energy to reviewing our assessment and outcomes that work better in the context of pandemics. My colleagues, Dr. Sharma has said, operationalizing humanity, look into more human aspect of our lives, and also connect to your students. Maybe we need to ask frequently our students what location they are joining us, what their health situation looked like. Did they have any disruption in the family due to COVID, any death or any illness, those things, reliability of their internet or even electricity, right? So sometimes we fail to look into those basic things that, that makes you probably an effective educators. I think we have to, trust our students, provide more belongingness, and focus on creating guidelines for effective learning that helps, how you include technology, how, you bring their opinions and then also feel, make them empower. I have been combining both, synchronous and, the recorded and both virtual and then recorded materials, real time, and also focusing on the recording, the lectures, some of these, short videos. That is helping very well. I think the best way, again, is I do in my field. I teach social sciences, and maybe those who are teaching in other lab or engineering, other field might be different. Best thing is to ask the students, write some responses or summaries about the classes and creating more meaningful interaction. You may not believe, the way we do in a face-to-face interaction, probably we should provide some breaks, even in online, classes, stretching, humors, and those things makes, very positive meanings rather than having 2 or 3 hours non-stop virtual session. And teach with the trust. Trust is critical to be the effective teaching or teachers. And you believe, students who trust, who understand, appreciate the value of the course and assignment, they are definitely motivated to perform better. And many of us, fail to look into mirror, ask ourselves, yourself, how you teach, how you assess, how you treat students, and how you evaluate their work. That reveals much about us. So it has given an opportunity, at least for me, to look, into my teaching practices, how I do and how I cope with the situation with my students. The other thing I have been learning is, I teach both online and face-to-face, is adopting technology and learning as we go, as we move forward. So, probably you don't realize how much you are resisting to the technology, not making a positive shift. Madam Dennis has earlier mentioned the Chief Innovation Officer. I think we should be that officer ourselves in our role. So if you are a faculty, if you are an admin or staff, why not you consider yourself that innovation officer to innovate yourself, provide some, incentive for yourself for doing something differently. For me, I've been learning a lot now, using the virtual background to developing some of the program courses or materials for the students as their needs or as a student request. So if you are a, administrator, definitely yes, look into the, best way to reward and provide incentives for faculty member who are doing things differently, and that's working better. And at my university, senior level administrators are constantly asking faculty member if they have new ideas, if they want to collaborate, if they want to provide, trainings or some share experience with the fellow faculty members. And it's working well despite, the other chaos that's happening. And this is global and, taking place across the globes. We don't have control, and probably the best thing is to do what we can do now. So that's my, reflection. And back to you, Dr. Liu.
Thank you, Dr. Bista. Because Dr. Bista and I have worked for years. I know him well. His research, what I hear from him, he's not only talking about like some thoughts, insight about on these questions, on these discussion questions, but also he meaningfully connect his research focus, as I just introduced at the beginning of this webinar. He has a strong expertise in student engagement, faculty and student relations, the role of advisors, how we can think about learning strategies in higher education that can effectively engage students in this, like not only face-to-face class, but also online remote teaching that many of us have to do in this pandemic, right? So with my experience, it's very interesting. I work at Ball State University, Teachers College. We have long tradition of providing our students remote distance, sometimes we call distance online education, because for example, as use my experience, I teach both master and PhD students course regarding curriculum development, curriculum studies, and many of my students are in classroom teachers. So each semester I teach one face-to-face course on curriculum studies, and plus other online online course. So I feel like this spring semester, this past spring semester, I didn't find my teaching helping disrupted a lot from my end. But of course, many of my students are K-12 teachers. Their schedules, their work have been significantly disrupted. As Dr. Bista mentioned, I need to think more about how I can bring student frustration, anxiety related to the pandemics to the coursework, right? Required me to reconsider my teaching strategies. But in terms of the format of my teaching, because of my institution, Teachers College, have been work on the online distance education for years, we accumulated some, remote teaching experience with the student. But for another department at my universities, many of our colleagues have been work on campus to teach face-to-face class. Sometimes it has been challenging for them to move their face-to-face classroom to online one. My university, have well-used division called Online Strategic Learning Division Department to provide software and workshop to faculties. So with that said, for example, in prepare for the reopening the fall semester, and during the summer, my university have do some service for faculties to collect the concern questions, problems, or requests, and using the summertime to prepare to teach faculties how to use online module and even some like specific software to redesign the course. This is something like have happened in my university in terms of like institutional change, institutional response to how we can engage students in learning in the upcoming semesters, and well-prepared faculties to well learn technology and how to design curriculum in using the online module. So that is my experience, and perhaps maybe we can call the practical tips for institutions. Very interestingly, I want to share my next experience with you. It's in spring academic semester, I think it's 2018 to 2019. I participated in faculty learning community organized by online strategic learning at Ball State University. In that learning community, many faculties from the whole campus to form a study group to learn how to use online tool to design redesign curriculum, engage the adult learner into learning. That is kind of like a prepared at least the learning community, faculty learning community members. So perhaps maybe for other institutions, including my institution, in the future, we can do more on that. This might be the part of what Ms. Dennis said, and how we reimagine higher education, some aspect of teaching learning. So I would like to say that. Mm-hmm. So with that said, we would like to hear from audience. What are your experience? What are your thoughts regarding how does COVID-19 impact the way in which if you are students are taught at college, university, if you are faculty, how this pandemic impact the way you taught. So today's webinar is a little different from a previous one. We want our audience have opportunity to engage this interactive conversation, because the topic is related to all of us, right? So if you have thoughts, ideas you want to share, please join us, so we can combine Q&A session and the panel conversation together to share your experience, your insights.
That's right. You can unmute your microphone if you want to share some information. And I see interesting interaction going on in the chat room. Dr. Smith has been posting some information. Dr. Smith, would you like to take us in a 30-second to update on the conference or some of the information, or anyone wants to say something, please let me know. And I hope you can unmute your microphone there. If you have any technical issues, challenge, I am here to help you as well. All right, then the floor is open. Dr. Smith?
Sure. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
The sessions I'm talking about, I'm a director of a conference, sort of one of my side jobs, I guess. I direct a conference in the US, but has worldwide focus on strategic enrollment management. And it's speaking a lot about what Marguerite was speaking to. And our focus this time is to take a conference, which normally has about 1,000 participants, and take it completely in person to completely virtual, but in doing so, put our focus on the crises that we're facing in higher education at the moment, of which two are particularly important to us. The first one is COVID-19, and how do we get through this? How do we adapt to it? How do we change? How do we continue to change? What will higher education look like? And how do the enrollment management folks support the various discussions on their campus to that effect? So that's one. And the second one, of course, ties into the Black Lives Matter discussion, and in particular, but also just broadly, the notion of social justice and equity as we move forward as well. And in fact, these two things just tie together. Our sense is that as institutions are doing some adaptation, issues about equity may not be at the top of the agenda. And so we want to have that kind of a conversation. So, and at the moment, we're looking for proposals, workshops, best practice sessions, roundtables. So any ideas you have, feel free to float them to me. I'll put my email address into the chat link. The second thing I've mentioned to you is that we're in the process of exploring this whole idea of the international student experience as it relates to open and online learning, and working on a research project as we speak that Dr. Vista is aware of. And as we were doing that, it occurred to us that, well, now we're in the middle of COVID-19 and everybody is doing open and online learning. And so So we paused our research a little bit, and in doing so, we thought it might be great to have a research symposium on that topic. And so we're trying to bring together virtually, which allows us to have a wider audience on that topic, but also to begin the idea of connecting researchers together. And so this particular research symposium will be a one-day event, followed a week later by a one-day networking connection kind of opportunity. So those are the two things that I'm involved in. And again, I want to thank the organizers for this webinar. This is spot on. Thanks.
Thank you, appreciate it. And I see some of our other colleagues are also willing to say something. So next we have here Tina. Tina wants to say something. Tina, I guess you can unmute your microphone. Hi.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all here. I mean, yeah, I also, this summer is really crazy. I've been changing all curriculum and instructions to teach online, and also I'm teaching. Most of the students are international students, so we needed to provide an online seminar course for international students. Everything is just really crazy. And then one thing, that's why this the webinar is so meaningful for me, to think as a researcher and also as an educator how we can deal with these situations as an opportunity. But one thing really makes me really, I mean, this is a question, or we can discuss more. While listening to this today's webinar, I've been thinking a lot about open education resources. And then Dr. Dennis emphasized we needed to collaborate. But then I'm thinking collaborate with whom and how between institutions. And before that, I was very optimistic regarding open resource education. But then now I realized in this COVID-19 situation, to what extent and how much the institutions want to use and open their educational resources, and then at the their knowledge and then their skill set, you know, and then also the other, my concern is that online education is not cheap, but in somehow we have very wrong, how can I say, stereotypes or perspectives. Online should be cheap, online is cheap, but that can be cheap once we have an infrastructure. But how many institutions are now ready to provide a quality online education? Then I'm concerning that in this COVID-19 situation is threatening to the little small college and universities, and or maybe bigger, larger universities can be dominant in this educational market. I hate to say the market, but you know, environment, and especially in the global wise. So luckily, my institution that I'm working, the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, we have a strong foundation and resources to support the students and faculty in terms of online education. But I don't know. Yes, I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but these are two my big concern in this COVID-19. Yeah.
Thank
Could
you.
I answer that, please?
Yes.
I think this is a perfect example of what, in a reimagined university, you would take to the vision committee that's chaired by a chief innovation officer. You have an idea and you're thinking from the end that you want to collaborate, but you don't know how to do it. Okay, you should not be charged with doing that on your own. This should be taken to a committee that has been put together by the head of your university to take suggestions such as you have just made and make them happen. How can we collaborate? How can we get through the financial implications of a totally online program? This is a perfect example of what I was trying to illustrate before, and unfortunately, we don't have enough time to go through all of that. But this is something that not a strategic planning committee, and not your department, and not your department chair, but the university as a whole, because what you are suggesting would impact all departments. And so I thank you for it, because you've illustrated to me, and I hadn't quite thought about it in that way. But this is a question for your vision committee to answer.
Thank you so much. I know we have a couple of minutes left. I have a couple of questions here from other colleagues as well. So I'd like to invite Professor Dr. Ratna Ghosh. She's the distinguished professor and then former president of the CIES, our advisor of the Study Abroad and International Student Special Interest Group. She's from McGill University. So Professor Ghosh, you have a question for us, right, for the panel?
Yes, thank you so much. Very, very, very interesting. I'm particularly interested in asking, do you have any ideas on how one can reimagine what we have been doing in the last few years, something that has been increasing a lot, which is student and faculty mobility? How could we reimagine it? I mean, do you have any ideas on that?
Do we have another hour? Can we extend this for another hour? I do. And if you, Dr. Poe, send me your contact information. I have put together a series of informational bulletins on the Reimagined University that talks about this, but also I will be writing a white paper or a monograph outlining my ideas, not for the academic part, but for the administrative part and the international student mobility part of how we can reimagine. And I'd be happy to send that to you. But it's a great question. I could speak for an hour on it, because I've been spending the last 4 months reimagining what it would be like to work in a different kind of university, where you don't have the silos, where you don't have the restrictions, where you don't have but we never did it that way. I can't think out of the box. I can't think in the box. We have to have people who think with no box, not in or out, but no box. So please send me your contact information, and I will send you what I have written so far on the Reimagined University, and then send you my white paper when it's finished, when my research is finished.
That would be very good for me.
Good, thank you.
I have been wondering, but I can't come up with very many ideas. So that would be extremely helpful for me.
Please send me your contact information, and I will get it out to you within the next 2 days.
Thank you so much. Bye.
You're most welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all audience and our panelists to share your unique perspective, insights with all of us. Now today's conversation is quite dynamic. Yeah, the 1 hour is definitely not enough. We will plan more webinars. This is why webinar is provide us a useful platform to share our concern, as Tina, just share with us, and Ms. Dennis responded, and another wonderful colleagues, ask the questions. We actually think about the webinar we initiated. It's just a starting point. We have many, questions we need to think about. We want to use the platform for all of us to share our concern and our idea. On the behalf of STAR Scholars Network, I would like to thank you, Ms. Dennis and Ms. Dr. Bista, again for your presentation and your discussion. And also want to thank you all audience for joining us today to share your concern questions. And STAR Scholars Network will offer us another upcoming webinars regarding higher education. The upcoming one in next month is regarding is about tips for publications. So to find more information, please visit STAR Scholars Network website. So we will continue the conversation. Please email it to the panelists if you have any question. If you have any question. Now, this is Ms. Dennis' email address, myself, Dr. Bista, and Dr. Gali, the president of STAR. So thank you for all of you joining today. Dr. Bista. Mhm.
Yeah, could you go to the one more slide, before that? Yes, that's the
This
one.
one?
The certificate one. Would you tell our guest, for those who are willing to get the certificates?
Okay, thank you. Do
Yes.
folks have any more questions, or if you want to share your questions or collaborations or like suggestions for webinar, please, feel free to share your suggestion, advice about like how we can use this style webinar platform to organize a more meaningful topic that might be really meaningful and useful to you. So we are open to your suggestion and feedback before we wrap up, before you leave. So if you have any suggestions, advice for